Okay. Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's episode. The title is "The Edge of Imagination," and really, I was kind of thinking of writing the edges of imagination because my mind could conceive two sorts of edges. However, I thought it's an interesting idea for someone to speak about the edge of imagination because we tend to think imagination is an edge for reality. That means when you wake up in the morning, when you're in your conscious waking state, when you look at life and when you look at existence. Sorry, guys, to continue. When you look at the edge of imagination, edge of reality, I consider that any sort of moving, intelligent, individualized phenomena, anytime it wonders about its destination, either it will be a shift from individuality into collectivity, or it will be a shift from individuality to, in some sense, what do you call it, the void. So for me, it's a fair enough idea to consider that existence is oscillating between the known and the unknown, and what that means in every moment there's known factors and unknown factors. And what that means is when we look at reality, we kind of notice a sort of void, a sort of space where all matter is in. At the same time, we notice that the phenomena, the matter in the space can continue or collapse into what appears to us as nothing. I had been kind of acquainted with metaphysics early on in my life. That means the idea of the soul, I had heard it early on, and it wasn't, it was kind of like, it was an idea that I was comfortable with. It was as if the soul, everybody, it was this sort of eternal moment of their intelligence, you know? Now, it took me a while. It took me a while. Sometimes when you're younger, you hear something, and it's as if it's like, um, as you grow older, you see dimensions in what you heard. Believe it or not, as the environment, as the world changes, many dimensions of self tend to be experienced. When the self changes the world, the dimensional change of the world can become accessible to many selves. That means if I just think about an idea and I don't, for example, share this talk, these ideas would kind of be in, what was the name? As Wittgenstein would say, it's as if in the silence the idea passes by. You know, what cannot be said passes away in silence. Something like that, Wittgenstein said. For me, that's a very interesting idea. That there is a sort of silent storage behind our eyes where various subjective phenomena kind of dwell in, and it's the choice. It's as if everything, like for example, I've seen a vision behind my eyes and I've drawn it on a piece of paper. It was a choice. Sometimes I feel free will is the administrator of what content from the inner realm comes to the outer or can be ascribed to the outer, or how the outer ascribes in the inner. What's very interesting is that it's kind of like behind your eyes, you're a mind projecting reality. In front of your eyes, you're a body projecting a mind. You know? The edge of imagination or the edges of imagination, because imagination seems to be the flexible extension of reality, seems to be as if like we're using reality, the images from observable physical reality, as kind of sticks and stones to make the fire of imagination. That means usually when I tend to see something in my subtler planes, if I concentrate on it, I can see its patterns and other things. It's kind of like learning the alphabet and then suddenly the words become clear, you know? How they are constituted. It's kind of like you look at a word, sure, there's the meaning of the word, but you also have access to the four individual letters. So imagine, you know, if I think about, for example, my name, my real name is Amin, Amin. And when I used to think about those letters, am I each individual letter? Is each individual letter stand like on its own, me, or is the whole name me? Do you know? And so that's the thing. It's really that the mind is like a camera lens. It can zoom in and zoom out. When it zooms out, I find that it becomes an observer. When it zooms in, it becomes engaged. It's a good question, I think. I think it's a fair question to ask, especially in 2020. What is the imagination? Do you know? For some people, it's like a spark of inspiration. For some people, it is, in some sense, like at least in my experience, it's an invisible room. That means the content in my imagination. I mean, I know that when like a bunch of people are in one room, like imagine me and you were all, if I was in a room with a bunch of people, like it's not that people's thoughts and the way people's attention is constituted and their inner realm doesn't reflect out. I have this mentality that you really cannot hide from life, you know? Honestly, I find myself um, staring at questions that I wonder if other human beings are engaged with. For me, it's like the concept of imagination before 2011, I didn't care. I didn't care about the inner constitution of man. I didn't care for how the human being was living a life behind its eyes. And it took me a while to suddenly notice the objective realm and the subjective realm. And then when I noticed the subjective realm, it was as if like I managed to pull out Excalibur, you know? It was a very profound moment when I realized that every idea that has entered my vision never needed to define me. I am the definer of that idea. It is my attention that that concept is conditionally living in. And when the human being realizes the importance of its own attention, the ultimate value that man can give himself is an unknown value. What that means is sometimes I've noticed certain people in history when I've kind of looked at different philosophers, it's as if what their genius was not was it wasn't what they had found. Their genius was they had noticed something in a looped pattern, that it was as if for centuries it was going on as a loop, and suddenly one person noticed it and it's like, whoa. I have noticed that it's like the world has a sort of shyness, and especially if you are in more of a strict kind of society, that shyness will be intense. Pretty much, this is the deal, guys. Some cultures, I don't want to say cultures, pretty much the human life, it's like your eyes open, waves of information hit you. These waves of information, some of them get to you, they influence you, and some of them don't. When you realize the subjective realm, it's like these things, it's like ideas that bombard you throughout the day. You simply become their observer. The Buddha has a story that he sat by a tree and behind his eyes, the armies of darkness, in some sense, the chaotic archetypes, all shot arrows at him. I think it was these three kind of demon sisters or something. I'm not sure what the exact who is throwing the arch, but it was the archetypes of chaos. It was pretty much his mind was attacking him, right? And in that second, in behind his eyes, as he sat down in meditation, all those arrows that are hitting him instantly transform into lotuses and fall down on the ground. And that was when the Buddha kind of realized the freedom we have in our subjective realms, but we live in such a conditioned society that for you to be free will make the other person feel they are not free, you know? More than I've seen, I don't want to say more, but like I've seen moments where human beings have compassion, and I've seen moments where the inner realms of human beings is not content, you know? It's kind of like the world is like the father coming home on Christmas and giving Christmas gifts to the kids, right? And the kids looking at the different Christmas gifts, and if they were a lonely child, they would be happy with the gift. But because they have other siblings and they see the other gifts their siblings have, then they have room to complain. They're like, "What is this? That person? It's like that guy gets more than me." you know so it becomes that mentality of trying to stay in the game by being up to par and ultimately kind of trying to take quicker. It was such a relief in my life when I kind of came across a quote from Gandhi where he said there's more to life than increasing its speed. And I noticed that since my youth, I had a paranoia. It wasn't even, it's like before even thinking about what life I was living as a human being, I was trying to live I was trying to satisfy realities that had entered my mind from the voice of others. It took me a while to kind of notice, okay, you know, it's like, okay, you're here once, don't freak out and just grab everything you see in front of you. Reality needs to have, I find, an elegance, a sort of style, a sort of secret style of your own eyes. I don't know if I can say that. There's a quote ascribed to Da Vinci. He says, to develop a complete mind, study the science of art, study the art of science. Learn to see, realize how everything connects to everything else. Now, Da Vinci, we can consider that he was a man who, I believe, he would write with his left hand and draw with his right hand, something like that, at the same time. Now, in order to do that, one has to be a witness of two dimensions. And I've tried. I've tried kind of writing with two hands. Like my left hand is definitely behind. Like it's But like I've tried, and really what happens is you can't do it by having both of your eyes on one. So strangely, when a person is kind of doing an emotion, usually when a person is not in a dualistic witness, they tend to go into an emotion. So you can kind of say if duality was a sphere and you're inside it, you have no emotion. When you come outside, when you can witness both values of that dualistic um, kind of moment, or like you kind of notice, you observe the axis of your kind of present value. I don't know how to say it, but this life is more than what we see, which means we have predominantly based everything on our sight. You know, that means it's kind of like, I'm pretty sure, like people who, in some sense, it's like if you didn't have sight, would you ask for evidence, or would the evidence be limited to sound or in other senses? So when you see, you are kind of like this sensory data processor, biological data processor, and the sense, your sensory perception is receiving your environment. What that means is how you see your environment, how you see your environment when you move in it is your creation. And in some sense, kind of like when the environment, how is it? It's like a symbiosis between the whole cosmos moving and an individual moving in the whole cosmos. This symbiosis is, it's like what's separating the individual from the cosmos. It is its distinctions. And when people go towards Vedanta and yogic thought, what happens is they begin being told, you're not the thoughts you have. And the person's like, whoa, I'm not these thoughts? Then what am I? And that's when they would say, stay silent, stay silent, stay silent. And the person would be, why? Why should I stay silent? Only to realize that that is the only gate. I can't emphasize this enough. When life is complex, literally when you are in life externally, when you're suffering, here's the way to kind of handle suffering. If you're suffering because of a complex situation, because how things are in a complex way, you can say, first become still and silent. That means anybody who has any problem in their life of any sort, just for a second, breathe in a moment where you're acknowledging the problem, then sit down still and silent. Just sit. Just sit for a moment. You don't know how much just sitting still and silent helps. And even if you kind of like feel you're going to get tired of sitting, I'll tell you something even better. You can say this is one of Mr. Within's kind of suggestions for a meditative practice. Just lie down on the floor, and lie down on the floor of course, indoors in your house or somewhere. Lie down in your room or somewhere, like lie down on the ground somewhere you don't expect. Like lie down in the middle of the hallway on the tiles of the ground. Sometimes when I was younger, I would when I like my I would run around in the house with a soccer ball and kind of put different chairs. Kind of, this is me like when I was like 14 or something, you know. I remember we had this long hallway in my house in Iran. Um, uh, um, and I would put different chairs, and it was at that kind of point in my life where I was just watching football compilations on YouTube and everywhere I could find, and I was just dribbling this soccer ball past like 12 chairs in the hallway, and I would run at a fast speed. Sometimes my body would get overheated, so I would just lie down on the tiles of the ground, you know? So I'm saying, like, just lie down somewhere. Just the whole point is to be still and silent, and then your mind, settles itself like a pond, and all answers come to you, believe it or not. This is why Rumi says, I have lived on the edge of insanity, wanting to know reasons, knocking on a door. It opens. I've been knocking from the inside. If I was to ask the question, what is the edge of my imagination in this moment? I would say it's where the effort begins. That's the edge. That means if the attention doesn't consider reality, there is no imagination. So it's as if, in some sense, it's like a void. That means any being who can acknowledge emptiness, then you can also enjoy how life can be full. To not fear when life changes, that is greatness. To be able to watch the game while it happens, to realize that life is not about analysis or subjective analysis per se, that language is a tool that we use when required. It's like, is a technology. That means I don't use my phone if I'm not making a phone call. So it's as if the technology has come into be there for use. And when we, for example, use language in society to speak, or anytime there's another mind, anytime there's another person in the room, believe it or not, it changes my subjective disposition. That means you can say the more minds in a room, the less those minds can be themselves, because they're considering other senses of animate self. The greatest thing one can do is quickly make their world and their ally. And what that means is, back in the day, it was as if people were creatures, their eyes had opened, and civilization was nowhere near as advanced as it is now. Now there is so many activities you can do. Back in the day, maybe like one farmer had lost his cow, and you had to go find that cow as a quest. So you see, it's as if our desires make us not want to be in where we are. And that's one thing I noticed, that in yogic thought, where they said put aside your desires, they didn't mean don't desire. I mean, you can't. Every yogi who has said renounce desire, that yogi has had a desire probably to drink a glass of water after that speech. So desire is not wrong. It is the object of desire, or the subject of desire. For example, sometimes when a person, uh, I learned this the hard way, a person's mind can fall in love with something they don't know. So what that means is, the person's mind can see see something, and instead of, like, for example, imagine person A looks at person B, person A instantly falls in love with person B. Person B doesn't know person A. Person A doesn't know person B. Person A talks to person B and talks with such love and such passion, until realizes, after person B demonstrates what their mind is and who they are, that who he thought, for example, that girl was not her. That means I have seen, how can I say it? Um, it's kind of been a privilege in both ways, to see externally beautiful girls but internally very ugly, and see externally ugly girls and see internally very beautiful. And sometimes I wondered, why is this? And I realized, because it's contentment and humility. That's it. That's it. What you are, you accept instantaneously. Do you know? Then life becomes about what you build. So for example, like, imagine Michael Jackson, instead of, for example, focusing, of course, I'm saying this respectfully, he had a great influence on the cultural development of our civilization, believe it or not. You know? But anyways, kind of Michael Jackson, imagine all that time he spent, all those moments in his life where he was thinking, his attention was on his skin, changing the color of his skin. Imagine. He was thinking of making music all that time. And so that's why I'm saying it's all about navigation of attention. And really, it's kind of like, people need to stop trying to be soldiers of ideologies, and need to start acting like commanders and generals of it. What does that mean? That means you observe, then you implement action. You then observe how your action was, then you implement action. you know? Life is a very interesting place. In some environments, it is you are alone with the cosmos in some states of mind. In some states of mind, the cosmos is not the point, and it is what is in the cosmos. That means what's really interesting is that when I find myself in society, I find myself not thinking about the stars and the galaxies and their implication. That means in an when one is active in existence, because they are doing something in existence, they don't question the existence. It's as if that person who's late for work doesn't care what Rene Descartes said. Sometimes I have visualized, not visualized, it just comes. So what does that mean? That means like a person walks in the park, suddenly sees a bird fly on a branch. Now, did that person think that bird there? No, it came. And sometimes when it comes to the subjective realm, and of course, if anybody who hasn't heard my talks before, the subjective realm and the objective realm is really how I'm saying that just pretty much every living being, every conscious human being will look in the moment and they'll see, okay, objective component, they see their biological body. But then, as there is something seen, there is the seer. So you cannot have an object alone. There needs to be a mind. You cannot have a mind alone because what world would it be standing in? That means we need the world before we can have a self in the world. Do you see? And it's kind of like this law. Any self that doesn't care for its world, it doesn't care for itself. If you don't care for your species, that means even if you as a human being have kids, you kind of don't care about it. You know what I mean? It's like it's important. It's important because people are not one thing. You are a person. Like when I look at my personality compared to who I was years ago, I'm a totally different human being. You know? So what does that mean? That means we change. That means to be identified with too much static symbolism is unnecessary in a world that changes. So really, we are being ushered into a new era of acknowledging the human being no longer as a static phenomena separate from its, as a static image uh, or story separate from its world. The world is so dynamic. What that means is the storyteller is still telling the story, you know? The laws of nature are still occurring. This is existence. And sometimes I've wondered, what is existence? Is existence alone? Like, that's a very deep question in my mind. I think when a person thinks, is existence alone or is there someone with existence? That means that all existence, everything that has an existential quality, that means if we could see everything in the content of the whole cosmos, and all the stuff that exists. It's kind of like wondering why is there memory? Why is there memory of the void? Why in empty space there's stuff just there? This question is a fascinating question. Anytime it's kind of like the civilization asking why it's here and we realizing every individual human being is the reason, you know? And it's language. I am telling you, we have to create so much new language as a species. We don't realize it. Where all the schools are teaching old language. It's like other than it's like they should make a rule that a child cannot not a child a student cannot graduate from university until they have created a new idea in the field that they're graduating from, a new idea, something that has never kind of, that automatically when the student graduates, they have added something. They have not just kind of been, like in the movie Enemy at the Gates, just being given bullets and told run into the battlefield of an economical system. The thing is that it's like there is chaotic factors. The more people want the same thing, the more getting that same thing appears chaotic. So what it is like some people, yeah, they got to the system early, and so they defined it. Yet, what happens? What happens when there's one glass of water, you know, and there's a bunch of people wanting to grab that glass of water in the room? The person, there's, imagine like there's a room filled with 20 people, okay, and okay, 20 is too much. That means nobody gets the water at the bottom. Let's say there is two people or three people in a room, and the instant these three people, there's a glass of water there, or liquid of choice. But imagine there's a glass of water there. Those two, out of those three friends in the room, let's not say even friends. Those three people in the room, two of them instantly grab the water, or let's make them like four people. Three of them instantly grab the water, one doesn't. As the three hold the water and they're fighting for it, all three of them for a second look at the one who didn't grab the water, the only water in the room. And they're all looking at him. They're like, why didn't you reach for the water? You know? And the third person says, because after we drink that, we still need more water. So what's the point? What's the point of enduring something that has no destination? You know? And then they all realize they're in a room and they get out of that room and they have access to like the pure tap water. It's like I think many children raised in third world countries will come to kind of more modern countries only to be horrified that people are scared of drinking tap water when in some countries there is no water. That means it's like, are you more scared of what's in the water? Or are you more scared of not having water? You know? So it's like I'm telling you, it's the reason I think that immigration may have been a kind of, I don't know how to say it. It's like the world, it's like the more the country suffers, the more stronger the inner character of its citizens. But the more advanced a country, it's like the more better the citizens kind of lived in that system. So there's an objective component to the moment, there's a subjective component to the moment, there's a witnessing void component to the moment, and that witnessing void is present in an instant, but everything in that witnessing void is present in relation to other things, you know. Life is like you're a certain chemical in this life, and as you engage, there's a chemical reaction transforming both chemicals. So what that means is just like a person can't like punch something without feeling pressure on their hand. So it's like when you hit something, you're actually hitting yourself, you know? Imagine someone punching someone being equivalent to like someone punching exactly like your knuckles, where your knuckles are. It's like an impact, right? Okay, guys, I was talking about water to a degree that I just had to drink some water. Okay, so let's see. So, guys, my attention's on the chat section. At the boundary of Fantasia, the Oracle awaits. Ivan says, Sun's Ray loves that. Ivan, you say, MW, do you feel your subjective reality is congruent with the objective reality? If so, how do you know? Okay, so here's the thing. They're not. What do you mean? So I gotta ask you this, Ivan. What do you mean by congruent? Like, in what sense do you mean? Do you mean they are in sync? Because my objective reality and subjective reality, they appear as if two eyes that are being the same moment. It's like with two eyes you see the same object, you know? Sometimes it's like objective reality evokes the subjective. When someone's talking to you, it's as if you're not the one putting the thoughts there. You're the one receiving the thoughts in the moment, you know? So, Ivan, I would say just let me see. Mhm. No, because if it was exactly my objective reality, um, how can I say it? I would not notice the difference. You know what I mean? So even though, guys, I'm talking to the chat section, but but what I'm saying is like, so Ivan, here's the thing. In this moment, let me see, if I was to ask that question in this moment for myself, I'd see, okay, so there is an objective reality, my body sitting on this chair, and my subjective reality. Now, their direction and their alignment, the thing is, I have accepted that the objective reality, certain parts of it, I can, my free will can kind of, um, like do something about it, right? So, like, a lot of percentage of matter is as if like atoms that I'm not even concerning, you know. Subjective reality is, I wouldn't say it's like a rabbit hole. I would say, um, because it ends. No, like, what I mean by that is like how I have had countless days where I've kind of, like, even in these talks throughout the years, where I am seeing something there in my subjective realm. But the thing is, the subjective realm moves faster than the objective realm. That means before I sleep, I experience many, like, how many thoughts does a person have? As we categorize them. So it's like, behind my eyes, the content of the character is like literally the shores of a beach. Whatever's written on the sand, they smooth it out, right? So it's not constant. It's not there has to be the attention directed. So when I say you're a creature of attention, means that you are actually the attributeless observance of all the attributes in the moment. Now, whatever way you classify it. For some people, they don't even use the term subjective and objective. I'm using it currently. For some people, it's just purely experiential. You know how many people in India were illiterate people who had realized this sort of experience of how conscious existence is a sort of ultimate bliss, how existence and consciousness are present, how before we say objectivity, subjectivity, there is just being. In raw being, we have become conscious of a little part of what's happening. So we can say Even though we have opened our eyes in the cosmos, we cannot see everything, but we are the potential of sight. That means sometimes I'm like, was all of human existence made for eyes? Do you know, it's as if like, why were eyes required? I always thought that, not always, but it's like in various forms, the question has come. And not that it's a question of wondering why it's there or shouldn't be. It's kind of like you are in something, but how you are calling it something is because you're acknowledging you are seeing the thing, but the seer of the thing is not the thing. You know what I mean? Interesting, interesting. I feel I agree with you, Ivan. What you say in the chat section, I just saw it. So here's the thing. I'm real, and let me tell you this. If I ask you right now how much of your objective reality you have control, and if you're a thug, you'll be like, a lot, man, a lot. But you'll see it's that's not what I mean. Is that, can you change your DNA? Can you change your biological constitution? You see, no, it was a development over time. But what seems to be changing is the lens between. It's like the mind is changing between matter and consciousness. It's like we are a soul looking at a body, but through a mind that is endlessly changing and endless. The mind is so endless that I can't even end talking about. I honestly feel it's kind of like Socrates realizing the more you see, the more unknown you got to confront. So there is a responsibility with piloting your attention, because you are choosing to to acknowledge experience. That means, here, this is a cool thing. Let me just write. Let me see the how the dictionary defines experience. The dictionary, guys, can be a great source of knowledge and a great source of jokes. So, anyways, so experience. Let's see how Saint Dictionary defines it. So, as a mass noun, practical contact with and observation of facts or events. Okay? So, it still doesn't say who. The knowledge or skill acquired by a period of practical experience of something, especially that gained in a particular profession. So, it's exposure to some degree, an event or occurrence which leaves an impression on someone. And the verb is encounter or undergo or feel. Let me see how the dictionary defines self. A person's essential being. Ah, thanks, dictionary. A person's essential being that distinguishes them from others, specially considered as the object of introspection or reflexive action. And then there's a quote that says, like an example of a sentence, our alienation from our true selves. Guilt can be turned against the self. Or language is an aspect of a person's sense of self. Mhm. One's particular nature or personality, the qualities that make one individual or unique, and one's own interests or pleasure. So here's the thing. A person's essential being that distinguishes them from others. So you see, every word we have to give has to be a commentary on something separate from that word. What it means is an answer of in language will not satisfy a question of experience. Um, I'm gonna say this. Ivan, the question you asked, I like questions like that. Let me tell you why. Because the subjective realms can be piloted, they can be navigated. It's just that we have had an avoidance from a multidimensional perspective because it deceived us, we felt culturally. That means it's as if the atheist pushes aside all symbology that is found, for example, in religion, not realizing that it's like the theoretical physicist talking about parallel realities, and other dimensions. It's like the old religious book talking about different worlds. Pretty much as long as man has existed on this world, it's very common sense. We looked at what's around and we saw it's like, how can I say it? Uh, I don't know. I don't know what to say. It's like the person questions the source of the reality's framework only to realize that it's conditional and it's codependent with that imagination. That means when you wonder what the purpose of reality is, you come to a blank piece of paper where you are imposing value, and pretty much knowledge can be said about giving and taking, you know? What does that mean? That means it's as if some people um, um, I don't know, guys. What I'm like simply it's like it's something that's additional to the moment more than the objective component that isn't moving. So it's either self is moving faster than the world or the world is moving faster than the self. Any time the person's desires or sort of what they want out of life isn't met, they feel the world is moving faster than them. So just by feeling like you are being left behind from your own desire makes the person can unmotivate the person, can create stress. The thing is, it's like some things in life it's like pretty much this: everything in your life that is a problem, you are going against some river. And what does that mean? That means by a single turn the problem solution can be there. There's different angles to a problem. A problem never exists in a singular context. The whole point of man's mind and our intelligence arises because we look at an object and it could have value in multiple ways to us. I want to share the story of these three dervish friends. They find themselves at the edge of town, noticing a giant wall, a giant wall that has arose, you know. And they're walking by the side of this wall, and the friends are talking, and they're like, "Yo, you guys see this wall here before?" And then, and the other friends are like, "Nah, man, this wall came out of nowhere. What is this?" And so they're walking by this wall, and suddenly one of them sees a ladder, and well, the one who sees the ladder, he's like, "Guys, I got it. There's a ladder there. Let's go and see what's beside on the thing." So the guy goes. One of the friends goes up the ladder. He goes up the ladder, gets to the top of the ladder. He sees something that he just says, "Oh my God," and he just jumps in. He sees what's on the other side and he jumps in. And what he sees is the Garden of Paradise. He sees heaven. He sees a dimension where incompleteness doesn't exist. So he jumps in, you know. The second friend is like, yo, did that friend just jump this giant wall? And so he goes up, the second friend goes up, and he suddenly his eyes fall on the fields of Elysium, on the beautiful kind of plains of paradise. And in that second, it's as if he's like, I'm jumping in. And then for a second, his conscience taps him on the shoulder and he looks back down and he sees his friend is there. And he gets the sense like he doesn't want to leave the third friend in the unknown. So he looks at the third friend and says, "Hey man, the Garden of Paradise is up here. I'm jumping in." And he jumps in, and the third friend is like, "Excuse me." The third friend is like, "Garden of Paradise, okay." And he goes up. He goes up the ladder, and his eyes see it. His eyes see the Garden of Paradise. He finds himself in a moment in manifestation where all his senses of self from all his memories in his conscious mind are commanding him, go inside, go into this heaven. Even his conscience is like, yeah, go. It's you're there. It's like this is the ultimate, you know? And something suddenly, the human side that is not willing to become a god before the world has been lifted into the heavens. So anyways, so the third friend sees this and he's about to jump in, and then he's like, oh my god, the Garden of Paradise is here. The whole world should know. He climbs down. And as he climbs down, even though there's not, like, I don't know, maybe a few people hear about, some people never even see the wall, some people never go to the edge of town, who knows? But he keeps alive a slow, a subtle pattern in the system that has acknowledged the potential. So what that means is when you feel hopeless in your individual life, an advanced civilization should be the one kind of filling those gaps. But we currently don't find ourselves in an advanced civilization. So what that means is a lot of how we process life, whether it's chaotic or ordered or whatever happens, how can I say it? It's like a civilization that values what's actually here on this rock. Not 8 billion bodies, 8 billion minds. And what can these minds do? Like if you ask someone, hey, what does the mind do? And the person would be like this. It would ask me questions like this. But but what I mean is simply, I don't know. The mind is like the bridge between the inner realm and the outer. One may even speculate that beyond the relationship with the mind, there is no inner and outer. One can see life as a field of intelligence, attributeless experiential field of intelligence where all particles are moving in, or they can see themselves as the particle moving the field of intelligence. Human beings have access to both, you know. And I think what it is we are not kind of meant to be in heaven, and we're not kind of meant to be in hell, and we're kind of like in the middle of the good and the bad that our civilization has kind of considered. So what's happening first is there needs to be a unionization. There needs to be a unification of moral values. So, for example, in the Tower of Babylon, it's like this Christian story that all human beings got united under one language, built a tower to the gods, and the gods freaked out and kind of made human beings speak different languages. So human beings couldn't work together, didn't see the same reality to even build the grand tower. So what that means is an advanced civilization was developing, and when a unified language broke, the civilization couldn't advance anymore. So what does that mean? The gods divided and conquered man's mind. That means there could be potentially a suggestion that we did not start off as individual beings, that the only way the early civilizations continued is because they were not evolved individually. So what that means is it's like a field of intelligence, a collective field of intelligence raises an individual conscious being, and an unconscious kind of field. And this conscious being, it's like a wave. It has emerged and it will return. It will subside. So what's cool is like the person acknowledges reality and they acknowledge imagination. And what's funny is people, they cry over reality. You know, if something in reality changes, they cry. And it's not that crying is wrong or whatever. I'm just saying it's like, when the objective changes, tears come into their eyes. But how many people have cried over forgetting a thought? How many people have cried over how ideology comes and goes? It's like your mind is an antenna. It's like your phone kind of goes into one environment, it picks up the different Wi-Fi kind of outlets that there are there, in the area. So similarly, it's like as the being is moving in various environments, not only is the environment being a influence upon your voice, not only is your intentions and what you want out of life being an influence, but it's like ultimately it's nature in nature. And it has behaved unnaturally for continuity purposes. So what that means is when you kind of look at the existential landscape, you're like, okay, we're on a pebble in a light beam. Okay. Just the fact that there's black holes in space is for me shocking. Like, I don't know, scientists must be very strong beings, because just like how there's something that we can't see further, there's a black hole, legit a hole where gravity is so intense that we can't see. Even if we sent something in it, we wouldn't be able to see it back, you know? So what does that mean? That means the unknown is around. The unknown. So what that would kind of be like your ancestors were continuing a certain knowledge, but you as a being have realized it's not kind of like living the same life but living your life. And I think that's the novelty factor of it, you know. it's it's like, here's an ultimate wisdom, trust your eyes. What else could you do? You have to trust something, like the person, in order to even communicate, has to trust in some structure, you know. um, I'm feeling like going into a quote tunnel, and I just want to see what people throughout history have said about the imagination. Let's just go into a quote tunnel of what people have said about the imagination. So, Dr. Seuss, I like nonsense. It wakes up the brain cells. Oh my god, this is too much from Dr. Seuss. Okay, let's see. Okay, there we go. Albert Einstein says logic will get you from A to B. Imagination will take you everywhere. Walt Disney says when you're curious, you find lots of interesting things to do. Thomas Edison says great ideas originate in the muscles. Michelangelo says, I saw the angel in the marble and carved until I set him free. Immanuel Kant says happiness is not an ideal of reason, but of imagination. Carl Sagan says imagination will often carry us to worlds that never were, but without it we go nowhere. Edison again says to invent you need a good imagination and a pile of junk. Yeah, because it's everything is junk until you create that invention. Yeah. Edgar Allan Poe says they who dream by day are cognizant of many things which escape those who dream only by night. Michelangelo says, I read that. Dr. Seuss says, think left and think right and think low and think high. Oh, the thinks you can think up if you only try. I feel Dr. Seuss is speaking like an elfish language. Richard Wagner says imagination creates reality. Michelangelo says every block of stone has a statue inside it, and it is the task of the sculptor to discover it. This is so crucial, guys, because in Tibetan Buddhism, you can parallel this to an idea they had, which was treasure revealing, inner treasure revealing, like Pirates of the Caribbean treasure revealing. That's easy. Trying to find a heart in a chest or something. That's easy, guys. What's harder is the inner treasure, to have your mind no longer lie to you, and then you attain the trust of your awareness, your whole moment. So it's like I can say that religious person kind of just worshiping that shrine, you know not only does it look like idol worship, but that person worshiping that shrine, that person has trust only in a certain part of their moment. But to have trust in your whole moment of being means to experience a state of mind where the mind is stating things, where the mind is the originator. Behind the subjective realms, that I say it's evocational, but it's strangely evocational. It's like doesn't need a self for there to be an image. Like we need an objective self. For example, like if we had a built vehicle like a car, we need an objective self for something to drive it, right? But the imagination is kind of like the vehicle is not subject vehicle, but the vehicle is evoked. So it's like there is no identity required for phenomenology to have different value, but in front of your eyes, yeah, things are referential, and that can't be avoided. And to be honest, it's like we don't need to go too hyper metaphysical as a species, simply because, like some people kind of don't notice this, but Jean-Paul Sartre, he's an existential atheist from France, and he saw the essence, and like the surface of something and its depth. Like for example, we look at the surface of an ocean, we're like, what lies in those depths? So we have the kind of difference between something and its essence, right? So for Jean-Paul Sartre, he didn't see that dichotomy. It was as if like there didn't need to be a separation of a phenomena into body and soul. You know, it was as if for him they were the same. You know, that's a very interesting viewpoint, to be honest, because it means like if you don't consider deeper dimensions to phenomena, you are either considering you are in the deepest dimension, or worst case scenario, you are not and you're ignorant. But the idea had value in the sense that sometimes the depth is unreachable. So even not seeing that kind of deeper thing is okay. That means, what's hilarious? It's like all those people practicing Zen, um, uh, it's as if realizing suddenly that the person who has no clue about Zen is doing some things in such a Zen way that if they became sensitive and conscious to it, they might not be able to. You know, it's um, it's a return to isness, or how something is, just pure being. And pure being has no personality. I say it's beyond the language threshold. So I can say that I guess another answer, another dimension of an answer, another dimension of of my answer to you, Ivan, to that question would be that sometimes the unknown moves the known in my experience, and sometimes the known moves the unknown in my experience. When the known moves the unknown in my experience, it's my conscious free will. Like right now, as I'm giving this talk, it's like my attention is somewhere, and from that attention is arising the content that I'm sharing. Do you know? But it's as if like the known is kind of looking into the unknown. But moments where I've kind of like in dream states, or where I've just kind of sat down and a thought has come to me even without me even thinking of the thought. So in that moment, the unknown moved knowledge. So it's kind of realizing we are living in a living world, not we are alive in a lifeless world. The world can be alive, you know. In a in a book I wrote called "God-like Spheres," um, I kind of suggested we're all living inside a giant sun. So I kind of felt the whole universe is inside the sun, but of course that was just kind of, I just wanted to put the idea out there, be one of those kind of early people who said it, you know. But anyways, guys, I'll continue with this quote tunnel and we'll see where the talk goes. William Shakespeare says, "The lunatic, the lover, and the poet are of imagination, all compact. Are of imagination, all compact." George Bernard Shaw says, "Imagination is the beginning of creation. You imagine what you desire. You will what you imagine, and at last you create what you will." So George Bernard Shaw is saying, so if you want to create something, you have to kind of like Michelangelo see the statue in the marble, you know? And then Bernard Shaw says, you imagine what you desire. So what does that mean? That means that that type of angel you are seeing in the stone is your desire throughout the day, you know? So imagine if you wake up and your whole day is like a chunk of clay, and you living that day is like you seeing that angel and bring in the stone, or seeing that shape in the stone and bring it about, you know? So he says, you imagine what you desire, you will what you imagine, and at last you create what you will. So I actually, guys, I'm starting to see Bernard Shaw is really saying something heavy in this. So let's take it step by step, okay? Imagination is the beginning of creation. That means you got to see the angel in the stone. You imagine what you desire. Okay, so what kind of angel you see in the stone is what you desire from the day, and you will what you imagine. So what does that mean? That means it's like we are not just acting upon desire. We are seeing what we desire, and then there's like a space, and then there is action. Do you know? He says you will what you imagine. So let's see. You imagine what you desire. So let's say in this moment I desire right now to see world peace. So he says imagination is the beginning. So I gotta imagine world peace at first. Okay, a type of world peace out of, if the whole planet was like a chunk of clay, what kind of advance of a peaceful civilization do we see? You know. And peace doesn't mean chaos isn't there. Peace means it's peacefully conducted. So, so I see. He says, "You imagine what you desire." So I desire, let's say, you know, an advanced civilization. I imagine it. Okay. Now, after I've imagined, what can I do with what I have imagined upon reality? I can only act on it, or just keep imagining other layers. So what that means is it's like we see reality, our reaction to it is imagination, and our reaction to imagination is implementation of whatever we've seen so far. You know, so he says you will what you imagine, and at last you create what you will. Because that moment when it's like you've seen reality and you've seen you've noticed your what the phenomena in your objective realm, you've noticed it in your subjective realm, then what is left is the witness is either an external effort or an internal preservation, you know. Anyways, let's keep going with the quote. Khalil Gibran says, "I wash my hands of those who imagine chattering to be knowledge, silence to be ignorance, and affection to be art." If Khalil Gibran was alive now, he'd be washing his hands 24/7. Napoleon, but I understand what he's saying. That means sincerity. Napoleon Bonaparte says, Bonaparte Bonaparte says, imagination rules the world. Yeah, of course, this man imagined he was emperor and he became it. Like, you know, the law of attraction, people should be talking about Napoleon. Walt Disney says, I only hope that we don't lose sight of one thing, that it was all started by a mouse. Wow, wow, wow. Muhammad Ali says, the man who has no imagination has no wings. Yeah, you can't fly if you can't see a sky to fly in, to be honest. Uh, Johann Wolfgang von Goethe says, he who does not think much of himself is much more esteemed than he imagines. Contentment is also value, guys. Don't forget this. It's like, it's not just greatness. Great moments are not just in um, moments when you succeed. It's like how you treat your own failures suggests your greatness, suggests your awareness, really. Edison says to have a great idea, have a lot of them. Yeah. Pablo Picasso says, I paint objects as I think them, not as I see them. Interesting, interesting. Probably emotional then. Epictetus. Epictetus says, imagine for yourself a character, a model personality, whose example you determine to follow in private as well as in public. Yeah, that means be someone that you can be anywhere. That's the I think the wisdom he's trying to pass. Robin Williams, a great actor, he says you're only given a little spark of madness. You mustn't lose it. Stephen Covey says, live out of your imagination, not your history. Isaac Newton says a man may imagine things that are false, but he can only understand things that are true. For if the things to be false, the apprehension of them is not the understanding. Yeah. So if you don't know something is true or false, to fear the false is meaningless in some sense. Mark Twain says you can't depend on your eyes when your imagination is out of focus. Did I read that? Albert Einstein says, I cannot imagine a God who rewards and punishes the objects of his creation and is but a reflection of human frailty. um, let's see what else there is. William Blake says, what is now proved was once only imagined. Elie Wiesel says some stories are true that never happened. William Arthur Ward says, if you can imagine it, you can achieve it. If you can dream it, you can become it. Francis Bacon says they are all ill discoverers that think there is no land when they can see nothing but sea. John Lennon says reality leaves a lot to the imagination. Salvador Dali says those who do not want to imitate anything produce nothing. Francois de la Rochefoucauld says one is never fortunate or as unfortunate as one imagines. Arthur C. Clarke says new ideas pass through three periods. It can't be done, one. Two, it probably can be done, but it's not worth doing. Three, I knew it was a good idea all along. This is so true, guys. This is so true because you got to kind of look at things that everything is impossible until you try it. You try it from simplicity first. That means anytime you see a problem that's complex, what can you do? You can try to see what is the simpler way that problem is standing. You know, Baruch Spinoza says it may easily come to pass that a vain man may become proud and imagine himself pleasing to all when he is in reality a universal nuisance. Oh wow, you know why? I don't know, but I think it's if if this is the right Spinoza, I don't think this is the main Spinoza. Because there was or maybe I'm thinking of Laplace, I don't know. But guys, trust me, a lot of self-worth comes from social values. So if you can't observe the society, if you can't observe your environment, you're most likely defined by it. Um, anyways, let's read two more quotes and Napoleon Hill says first comes thought, then organization of that thought into ideas and plans, then transformation of those plans into reality. The beginning, as you will observe, is in your imagination. Wow, this is very true. How many things have we, our free will begins in our imagination. How fascinating is that? That effort, which is us living on the planet, is not just objectively inspired. There's a subjective inspiration, and it makes sense. Now, it's hard to say that if it was like this from the beginning, that the subjective realm was like an actual dimension. It's like it's easy to see the subjective self and the objective self as the same. You know, it's like so many people kind of see themselves as a mind, but when they look at other material phenomena, they feel it doesn't have a mind, you know? And so this kind of brings philosophy into the domain where the philosopher is saying, okay, if there was a God, are we the imagination of it? You know, it's like when I look at my mind, it's as if, like, when I think of something or when an idea emerges, it's out of nowhere. It's like no reference, then ta-da, the idea came, you know? So it's like that emergence out of nowhere can be a total realignment of meaning. That means the more multidimensional life is, the less you can actually prove it. So if we were creatures that thought life was in a singular dimension and only to realize that it is way more multidimensional, that means how can you prove a multidimensional system? Each dimension has a value. So that means it's like one person has seen you, they think you're a good person. One person has seen you, they think they're a bad person. One person has seen you, they think you're a sad person. One person sees you, they think you're a happy person. So which one are you at that? So life is very dynamic, you know. Aesop, which is a Greek dude, I believe, he says the level of our success is limited only by our imagination, and no act of kindness, however small, is ever wasted. David Hume says belief is nothing but a more vivid, lively, forcible, firm, steady conception of an object than what the imagination alone is ever able to attain. Josh Billing says there are lots of people who mistake their imagination for their memory. I mean, the memory is kind of imagination. Oscar Wilde says the imagination imitates, it is the critical spirit that creates. Albert Einstein says, I am enough of an artist to draw freely upon my imagination. Albert Einstein says, imagination is everything, it is the preview of life's coming attractions. Einstein says to raise new questions, new possibilities, to regard old problems from a new angle requires creative imagination and makes real advance in science. Henry David Thoreau says it is usually the imagination that is wounded first rather than the heart. It is being much more sensitive. And lastly, I'll end off with a quote from Marcus Aurelius. Aptitude found in the understanding Aptitude found in the understanding and is often inherited. Genius coming from reason and imagination rarely. So aptitude is found in the understanding and is often inherited. Genius comes from reason and imagination. Yeah, so one is like something you're given, the other is your application in the moment to discover something. I feel like reading one more. Okay, Plato. Carl Jung, there we go. Okay. So I'll read these two quotes from three quotes. I'll read three quotes. Carl Jung says, all the works of man have their origin in creative fantasy. What right have we then to depreciate imagination? Carl Jung says, without this play with fantasy, no creative work has ever yet come to birth. The depth we owe to the play of the imagination is incalculable. And lastly, Napoleon Bonaparte says, the human race is governed by its imagination. So what does that mean? That means if our imagination becomes our responsibility, the context that we as concepts are living becomes crucial. So it's like the first time where man did not just separate himself from the food chain and nature. We came into civilization, but it's like after that separation, now the world has become our responsibility. When we were animals in the jungle, we didn't have to care about the whole system. But when we separated from the system, there came the arrival of a sophisticated state of mind that the more it saw, the more the free will felt free willingly able to engage. So with greater free will comes greater like responsibility, you know. That power that Uncle Ben was talking about was the power of free will to Spider-Man when he's like when he's like with great power comes great responsibility, you know. What is that power? That power is choice. The choice of how your inner realms breathe and how your outer breathes as well, you know. Um, okay, guys, I'm looking at the chat section. So, Ivan, when you say, do you make conscious adjustment to your subjective reality to maintain congruency with objective reality, or is it an automatic process for you? Do I make a conscious adjustment to my subjective reality to maintain it with objective reality, or so? Here's the thing. Maybe I should say this. Um, Speech without sight is impossible. That means we speak when there's something to say, you know, when we can talk about something. And what that means is that with language comes from images. So when I, for example, give these talks, it's kind of the challenge for me is that the direction of the talk can go in multiple ways, but behind my eyes, as I speak, there is like as my attention goes on my subjective realm, it gains speed. So sometimes when I feel like the faster I speak, the more vivid that movie is behind my eyes. And it's kind of like a landscape. So what does that mean? That means it's like um, sometimes when I speak, I can speak in a singular kind of way, but I'm sometimes I see more of the like what I say is like the tip of the iceberg, but what is the iceberg hidden is a much more bigger play, you know? So you cannot, speech is kind of like if you treat language as a technology, you're driving it, okay? And when you're driving it, whenever you drive, you see a bit further ahead from the front view. You know, you see what's ahead in the road as you're driving and you adjust, right? So when I'm speaking, that kind of congruency, I at least I try to hold, has to do with that, where I'm kind of, before I speak, I'm seeing out the window of how the idea has moved, you know. And the automation part comes in different ways. That means some things are not automatic, but when something is important enough, life moves that way. That means the questions that I have instantaneously found the answers to because it was important. Like that moment where I was I remember like I was late somewhere and I had to get up and I was looking for the car keys. And it just for a moment, I was so late and I had to get there on time that I just closed my eyes and just the importance and urgency of that moment, I exactly knew where the car key was. It's like I didn't even have time. Like it was so important for me to get to that destination, like that it was. I wasn't even thinking about uh, how can I tell you, like the importance of where I had to be made it easier for me to navigate and where I was. It's strange. I don't know. It's kind of like um, we gotta on some level kind of look at it like Heraclitus, you know, where he said, "No man steps in the same river twice. Not the same man. It's not the same river." What he's saying is, it's like the state of the mind changes and alters in different moments. So right now, when I'm speaking, you can say the neurology in the brain, it was different than a couple seconds ago when I was saying something else, you know. So you see, it's like a pretty much the human design has to do with images and the acknowledgement of images, and really the opacity of the subjective realm. So sometimes the subjective realm, when your attention it becomes too externalized, it becomes uh, transparent. There we go, that's the word I'm looking for. It's observance, guys. When you observe, when you're the observer, when you experientially abide as the observer within, you don't do much. Life is a field of intelligence. The field moves more, you know. But when you associate, you become like a solid state rather than being in a liquid state of mind or a gas state of mind, you know. I'm kind of trying to use like the states that a substance can be in, such as, for example, water. It's similar to the mind, you know. And the best thing I could tell you is that um, you cannot debunk what reality means for you, for yourself experientially. There's no greater route. The words of other people will forever remain the words of other people until you realize your own voice. And that voice will be a new gaze at history, you know? Kind of, Lao Tzu said it so brilliantly, you must let go of who you are now to be who you're meant to. This doesn't mean that who you're meant to is what you want now. You know, there's so many factors in life. It's like the same way Michelangelo was kind of like seeing an angel in the stone and wanted to set it free, wanted to actualize it, the same way society saw Michelangelo and wanted him to be something. One problem one can say, very crucial, is that unless we acknowledge the subjective realm, the imagination will remain a mystery. And this is, I guess, a good thing to say before I end off the talk. The edge of imagination is the edge of your conscious reception in the moment. So what does that mean? That means you're seeing objective phenomena, you're conscious of it, but while you're seeing objective phenomena, let's say I look at this cup and I see behind my eyes the word cup, C-U-P, letters in green, for example. When I'm looking at a red Tim Hortons cup, but imagine I see the letters green, C-U-P, you know? So those letters, which are the definition of the cup, are they are in the conscious moment. So it's kind of like look at your hand, then look at how you see yourself as a name. It's as easy as looking at your hand, you know? Direct experience is where reality and imagination are occurring. Direct experience is not an object, but the awareness to the object feels separate, so therefore some people have personified the soul. It's kind of like we are the eyes of the cosmos in human form. It's like, what are you gonna do? You know? So, anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. I hope these ideas were helpful. I would encourage people to write. When you write, and when something, anything in your life you become is important for you, your true intelligence arises. When something is not important for you, your attention is fragmented. You know. So that means a person who's failed once and doesn't try anymore to succeed is like, okay, the success wasn't important for you. The failure evidently was more important than the success. The negative extraction out of the moment was more important for you than, for example, the positive, which was much more efficient. You know. So when it comes to efficient vision, that vision is experiential. Experiential means something is in the moment, aware it is here, and it's experiencing, and this experiencer has to somehow look at this existence and contain it, and it's been containing it in language only to realize that experience and existence are codependent. That means it's like the two sides of a coin were at war with one another. Um, Clinical sword, I'm looking at your question. I'm trying to comprehend it. So you're saying are applying the actualization and talk together, yet talking the talk while walking the walk. You see, it's kind of like talking the talk is Michelangelo seeing the angel in the stone. Walking the walk is him bringing the angel out into the stone. I would say talking the talk and walking the walk are two different states. They're two different states of mind. That means when I write, I don't edit. You know, when I give these talks, I treat it like a blank canvas and the painting's all natural on it. But like, how would I say it? When you realize nobody has your eyes, you are the only one who can authorize anything for your intelligence. So what does that mean? That means the boundaries of perception are self-contained, yet the self is a process of the world. So it's like they're semi-contained by free will. So that means maybe like 50% of reality is our free will's experience. Anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. And I'll share one last kind of story. It's a Zen story. Uh, there's this incredibly enlightened woman, this very beautiful, realized woman who is walking on this river back in the day. And as she's walking in this river, she's in this ecstatic bliss. That means after your desires and your mind calms down from wanting to be something in the future, it gets to see what is now, so it experiences a strange bliss once time isn't a treadmill. So this female sage is walking is walking in this river in this gentle stream, um, this bright woman, and she sees this giant ruby or something. She sees this next level crystal, you know, and she picks it up, and she's just feeling the crystal, and she's like, what a interesting sensation, what a beautiful object, and the object is so beautiful to her that she just holds it in her hand, you know, and she's walking in the river, and suddenly she gets to a part of the river, the stream. I should say river. Walking gently in the river is impossible. But in a stream, you know what I mean? Like she's walking in the stream, and there's a part of the stream that it just passes by this kind of road, and there's a young guy kind of with like he's bought bread and he's walking home, and for a second the young guy's looking around, and suddenly his head notices Terrence left, and he notices and he sees this woman who's walking, this enlightened woman who's walking in the river. He sees the ruby in his hand, excuse me, in her hand, and he sees the ruby in her hand, you know. And in that moment, in that in that moment, he just walks up to her and says, like as if he's instead of like stealing it, he says, "Please give me that now." Do you know? And it's as if he's asking it in a way where he's gonna take it. And the sage and the realized sage, she sees him, and she's like, "Here." And she gives him. She smiles and she gives it, and she sees the guy become super happy. You know, she gave him a diamond, and sees the guy become super happy, and the guy just forgets about everything. The guy just gets the ruby. He has like this loaf of bread, and like just puts the ruby, smashes it into the center of the bread. Okay, so the ruby's not visible, and he runs home holding this loaf of bread like it's an American football, and he's like he feels people could, you know, so so he runs home like a football player holding this bread with the ruby in it, and he gets home, he closes the door and puts the bread kind of like on the table and just dismantles it. At this point, he doesn't care about bread, like you know, the loaf of bread screams as he destroys it. Okay, I'm animating the story too much. Sorry, guys. We don't need to hear the screams of bread. Anyways, I hope I can get through this. Oh my god. Uh, I don't know why screaming bread was so funny to me. Anyways, what he does is, um, he takes the ruby out of the bread. He puts it on the table, and he's having that kind of mouth-watering taste of his future success, you know. And so he's there, and for a second, something he notices something. The guy is not 100% a fool, and he notices something, and he gets shocked, and that kind of smile of the desire of his own future just for a second pauses, and it's as if he's realizing something, and this is the moral of the story. He suddenly puts his hands on his face in shock, and he says, this is not the real treasure. The treasure is how easily that enlightened woman could give the ruby away. It's as if he realizes he had gained the objective treasure of the moment, but that enlightened yogini had in some sense, what do you call it, the inner treasure. She had a treasure of her soul, not a treasure of the body, you know. So anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. And really, the edge of imagination is your vision. Vision is the greatest privilege of existence, really. There's something observed and then action. You can even say all of history has been observance, action, and then the end of the system, and then observance, action, observe, and so this continues. So, one last thing. I know I'm kind of stretching this, but the subtler planes of abstraction. This idea comes from before I actually kind of started. I developed the term kind of like the subjective realm in the way I use it. Um, I would speak about like imagination as subtler planes because, like, as I was speaking, I say I sometimes see a film behind my eyes. That film is like it felt like it wasn't like as if my imagination is in another room that only I can see. You know, so I thought of it'd be an interesting way to kind of make it more practical, where we feel it's like our subtler planes, and we are on a conscious plane where the personality and the individuality and the name and the as a member of civilization exists. And so what that means is not only the world in front of us is multidimensional and occurring in multiple ways, but how we are alive behind our eyes also has a multiplicity. But the multiplicity behind your eyes has to do with the direct experiencer's evocation, and the multiplicity in front of your eyes is something that before you were even a being, it was being here. So anyways, thanks for tuning in, guys. Much blessings, and have a great day.